think it was National Post actually. California bans misinformation during the election, and it gets struck down nearly right away. But there's a hilarious Kamala Harris video that prompted the ban, and they're going to try and do this. They are coming for free speech everywhere. They're coming for free speech. Absolutely 100%. And what else? Weird that China didn't get this kind of consideration. So yesterday, the speaker said, listen, the liberal corruption is a little bit, it's getting to be a bit much, he says. And he suspended all other government action until this corruption gets addressed. And documents are produced that have been ordered by the House and so on and so forth. And so that's an interesting situation to be in. China didn't even get that. I don't understand how we can have Chinese traders, and that's A-okay. Chinese traders trying to pass censorship laws. Hey, no problems, guys. But liberal corruption, that's a bridge too far. So, I mean, there's lots to get to. Let's get to it. And maybe, I mean, this is the first cracks that I've seen, honest, real cracks that I've seen. Because even when Jagmeet Singh says, "Where I'm tearing up the deal," I didn't see it. I didn't see it. There was nobody had a real push to unseat this government, to bring this government down at all. Nobody. And now I'm actually starting to see that movement, and I'll show that to you. So there's lots to get to. Let's get to it first. We're starting with the Speaker of the House in Canada suspends all government action. Actually, first, this is a funny little faux pas that happened yesterday. And so he's practicing. You know what? Really, he's figured out the way the wind's blowing before the rest of the Liberals. And what's happened is he wants the Speaker job in the next session. That's what's going on here.
I take the floor when he's recognized by the Speaker. The Right Honourable Prime Minister, Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
So the Speaker accidentally called Mr. Polyev the Prime Minister, said Right Honourable Prime Minister. He's like, oh, So this kind of, I love political faux pas. They're so much fun. Anti-taxer says, wow, all parliamentary business is paused, including debates on bills like C13, online harms, C65. I thought it was C63. Isn't C63 the online harms bill? Maybe C13. C65 and C293 and all sorts of everything else. All parliamentary business is paused, including blah, 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 blah. Until the Liberals cooperate with Speaker Fergus's order to turn over evidence of corruption to the RCMP. Here is Andrew Scheer taking point on this. And there are certain sectors in the Conservative Party, and each one is functioning to hold their section accountable. And I mean, that's how shadow ministers work, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But previously, almost everything has gone through the leader. In this situation, there are other MPs who are the experts on, like, I'm thinking about Larry Brock and the two Michaels, right? Michael Cooper. And so it's interesting to me how much of the cabinet and much of the shadow cabinet is being utilized by Polyev. And this is an interesting turnabout. Is this kind of a weird prorogation, right? I mean, it doesn't kill all the bills on paper and things like that. Like, it doesn't end all government business, but everything's suspended. So it's kind of a weird quasi-prorogation. We'll see how it all plays out. Here's Andrew Scheer. It's 4 minutes, so we won't listen to the whole thing, but we'll listen to some of it. Here we go.
After 9 years, Justin Trudeau.
Oh, too fast. Oh, sorry. 9 years, Justin Trudeau, blah, blah, blah.
Worth the cost or their corruption. The Speaker has just recently ruled that all House business, all government business must be put aside while members of Parliament consider Liberal corruption. First, we had the case of the Green Slush Fund, the SDTC fund, where the Auditor General found over $330 million funneled to Liberal insiders' own businesses. She found massive conflicts of interest. Basically, these Liberal-appointed board members who made the decision as to which companies got money, taxpayers' money, from this fund, were funneling that money to their own businesses or to the businesses of their close friends. So the Auditor General has blown the whistle on that, yet the government refuses to hand over the documents to the RCMP. The House of Commons passed a production order demanding that all documents, all information that the Auditor General uncovered, plus any documents that might exist in any government department related to this scandal, be handed over to the RCMP. The government is refusing, and as a result, the House will be seized with this corruption matter until they hand over the documents. And then we have the case of the other Randy, where a senior Trudeau minister is alleged to have been sitting around the cabinet table while also involved in his own business's affairs. His business partner was summoned before a committee and refused to disclose all the information, refused to name who the other Andy is, refused to hand over all the documents and answer the questions that were put to him.
So corrupt. And so the Speaker of the House has put an end to any other government business until these documents are surrendered. And I mean, what kind of advantage would you have if you were in the room making the decisions about PPE, mandating PPE, and you own a business and you're like, like texting your buddy who is a co-owner of the business and you're like, order all the masks we can. We're pivoting right now, buddy. Blanchette is mad. He is very upset, and gov.exe says anyway, Blanchette says Trudeau government acted. What messed me up is the Y and the F. I know, but still. Anyway, Blanchette says the Trudeau government acted spinelessly by not providing the Bloc with a clear answer. Blanchette says he will begin the process to force an election as early as next week. This is a little quiet, so I'll try and increase the volume, but here he is. He is saying the Liberals had a chance, and I mean, they squandered it. Here we go.
Mr. Blanchette, why are you still willing to...
Too fast. Sorry, again. Too fast. Here we go. Back it up.
Mr. Blanchette, why are you still willing to work with the Liberal government when they voted down this motion? Is that not sending a signal in some sort?
Okay, let's understand things as they are. The government, I will learn that word one day, did not have the spine to provide us and Canadians and Quebecers with a clear answer. So they just want to get some more time and to keep not deciding about anything. They might hope that they will go further than October 29th. They will not. So they have until a few days from now to go on with the royal recommendation. And if they do not, we will start as rapidly as next week to speak with other oppositions in order to get ready to go into an election. And I will tell you both in English and French that it is noticeable that the NDP voted in favor of this motion and that they could have eventually to assume the consequences of such a vote if we get to the next step without the government providing us and Canadians and Quebecers with what we want.
Right. And so there was a vote, and the Bloc wanted the government to support the vote, and it was for a 10% increase to old age pensions across the country. And the Liberals did not support the vote, and the Bloc is saying they're being sneaky snakes, and we're going to pursue everything that we need to pursue to go to election, and if we get to the next step without having the information that we need, that we've asked for. And so again, he's talking about more than one thing, but there's lots of things going on, right? And maybe the NDP, if they support this government, they're going to have to wear that into the next election. He threatens, right? And the Gazette says Tom Mouclair is suspecting, is Trudeau set to pull the trigger on prorogation? The option is back on the table and could be a game changer if the Prime Minister follows up by stepping down as Liberal leader. It's interesting. That would change things a little bit. But who steps in as Liberal leader? Mark Carney? Mark Carney's not going to win an election. He's different than Trudeau, and he's a lot more like Pierre Poilievre, and so it'll be very two similar personalities, right? As the face of the party, if you will. So that'll be, I think, advantage Poilievre. Although it makes the Liberals look serious again, and they can throw off the Trudeau feminism nonsense, but they're not going to, because that's all the party has. All the party has is those division and lies, right? All the party has is climate change and gender ideology, and both are false. It's period. Like I don't think there's any arguing that. If you look at the facts of it, it's climate change is as valid as cutting someone's penis off and saying they're now a girl. It is not happening. Period. Just doesn't happen. Anyway, Tom Mouclair says the option is back on the table. Game changer, maybe. I'll just read it a little bit. For Canadian politicians, prorogation is the emergency brake you pull when your government train is about to run off the rails. Prorogation, simply put, occurs when a prime minister asks the governor general to suspend parliament for time in order to hit reset. In practical political terms, it often serves to distract and delay when you're in deep trouble. Stephen Harper famously used it to save his minority conservative government when the Liberals and the NDP signed an agreement to oust him. Governor General Michelle Jean was no fan of Harper, but she was bound by constitutional conventions to grant his request for prorogation. The inclusion of Bloc Québécois leaders Gilles Duceppe at the agreement announcement turned out to be its downfall. He wasn't formally part of the deal, but had promised to support the new government that would result from the Liberal NDP entente. Harper played the separatist card skillfully, and the NDP Liberal quasi-coalition was soon dead in the water. So, yeah, I mean, politics is a rough sport, right? And you have to be playing the game in order to win. And so it's interesting because the last couple of conservative leaders haven't been playing the game. They've been allowing Trudeau to set the pace. Poilievre seems to be trying to set the pace, and Trudeau seems to be playing catch up, and it's catching up to Trudeau. He can't stay ahead of the scandals anymore. And so will his government falls? If his government falls, will he try a prorogation to save it, a la Harper, right? To get Jagmeet that pension? Or will he allow the government to fall? I think that would be poetic justice if Jagmeet missed his pension. But funny, right? Like funny. We'll see. YEG Wave is talking about this. Now, this isn't really, this doesn't really have to do with federal government or anything like that. But I have to wonder where Danielle Smith is. Like, is she not aware of the 15-minute cities? Does she want Alberta to be the first jurisdiction in Canada to rezone? I mean, it already has happened, just happened. But does she want this to be rolled out? Could she stop it if she wanted to stop it? I don't know. She seems lackluster. She makes a lot of promises, but she doesn't follow through. Is that accurate? 50-50, right? What's the completion rate on her promises? YEG Wave says Edmonton has approved a 15-minute city plan along with new district policies and ideas for 14 areas across the city. The 15-minute city is a concept in urban planning where essential services like work, shopping, education, healthcare, and recreation are accessible within a 15-minute walk, bike ride, or public transit trip from any location in the city. The 14 districts are named Central, Ellerslie, Horse Hill, Jasper Place, Mill Woods and Meadows, Northeast, Northwest, Scona, Southeast, Southwest, West Edmonton, West Hendahay, and White Mud. White Mud? The city plans to begin implementing the new policies and plans immediately. So, yay! 15-minute cities are here. And barely a whisper. You know, I was out last night doing grocery shopping, and I went to Costco. And the Costco entry used to be you just held up your card and somebody checked it and you kind of got waved through. Do you know what it is now? Scan your barcode. Scan your barcode. The digital identities here. Costco is like upper echelon. Like the guy who owns Costco is a Democrat. He donates to Democrats. He donates to liberals, right? Like he's a very, very progressive kind of person. And the corporation is supposed to be progressive as well. And so this is the first salvo that I've seen in action in public. And I felt very conflicted about continuing to I went in and I got the thing that I needed and I went out and I was like, damn it. Like, I feel icky, you know? And so it's coming. And like, what happens when you go to like the grocery store and Walmart says, to combat theft, you need this Walmart card to prove who you are to come into our store. Is that going to be okay? Like, jeepers, it's such a, oh man. And like Costco with the membership, you're already soft used to it, right? Like I walked in and I was like, oh my gosh, we're scanning things now? This is ridiculous. Like, this is not good. And how much time, I fear it's like the AI and police forces. This is a technology that the powers that be desperately want rolled out and normalized, and they're going to do it as fast as possible, right? So, it's not good. It's not good. And with these 15-minute cities, there doesn't appear to be anybody stopping it. So if we want to stop it, we need to come up with a new plan for how to stop it, because the current plan's not working. Not working by a lot. The food professor, let's talk about money and misuse of money, misappropriation of tax dollars, and so on. And the food professor says taxing groceries is immoral, full stop. And so it's an opinion piece in the Journal de Montreal and by the food professor himself. And I think we're getting closer to the point. I've said for a long time, if you get somebody who is patriotic in charge, if you get somebody who feels like it's their job to take care of the citizens in their jurisdiction, then if you take a look at the balance sheet and you say, what is the most important thing to make cheap or to make accessible to make everybody's life better, you realize right away that energy and food, right? Like, you make sure energy is cheap, then everything else is cheap, because like moving it's cheap, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Filling up your tractor is cheap. Harvesting your food is cheap. Drying your grain is cheap, right? So all of these things are cheaper if the inputs are cheaper. And so when you add a tax to things, you add a cost to things, and that cost increases the price. And if you're poor, an added 100%, if something was $2.50 and is now $5, $4.99, that's a big increase and will remove your ability to be flexible and utilize your limited resources in an effective way, right? And so now we're seeing people who are in the establishment, because he's a professor at one of the universities, right, saying, we need to stop taxing these inputs. It's immoral. It is, right? Like, anybody with sense, anybody who cares about their citizens knows that if you tax the inputs, that's bad, super duper bad, super bad. And so I like that we're seeing these kind of cracks. I like that we're seeing people definitely questioning these things. And more people are questioning it too. Dan McTeague's highlighting this standing committee on finance back and forth. Pat Kelly says every truck on the road is paying up to $20,000 per year in carbon taxes. Canadian Trucking Alliance says this is grossly inflating the supply chain, meaning Canadians pay more for everything that's shipped by truck, and everything's shipped by truck. Dan McTeague says add the $30,000 a year per truck doesn't include, and the $30,000 per year per truck. I think it's $20,000 he's talking about here, but I haven't expanded this, so I'm not sure. Per trucker doesn't include the federal Liberals' clean fuel regulation, which is the second carbon tax for 20 cents a liter, or another $15,000 per truck per year. So we have an unbelievable amount of money being taxed and sent to the government on behalf of climate change nonsense that's just inflating the price of the inputs. And that's immoral. And they damn well know it, right? And now these people are waking up to it, right? Up till now, they've been claiming the moral high road by saying we have to take from the people who have a lot to redistribute it to the people who don't. But now it seems like they're just giving it to their liberal insiders, right? And I've got a whole scam section here, but they're giving it to connected family, friends, or companies that they themselves own, right? Like, so they take our tax dollars and say, climate change. I'm doing everything we can for climate change for our future. And then they say, hey, Randy, do you know a guy named Randy who's got a mask company? Yeah. Do you want to have a couple $1 million? Because I've got all this money here. I can barely swim in my money bin, right? Like, I need to air it out a little bit, get some money out of here. It's wild. And they just share it around. And it's so fraudulent. And people are, finally waking up, right? But the good news with the government business being paused in order to investigate the government corruption, it means a pause on the moving forward. And like we talked about this already, but pausing the moving forward of C63 and the other ones, 293 and others, would be very, very beneficial, because those things mean the end of traditional free speech in Canada. What you and I consider what you and I would consider our right, what's covered by the Charter and so on and so forth. If you think it, you can say it, right? I digress. So we'll see. Brian Lilly is talking about how they're going to use net zero to bring companies and businesses in line, or basically be destroyed. Brian Lilly says of this National Post article, the National Post article says, Mark Carney, old yellow teeth, warns that net zero will mean significant stranded property assets. And that just means that the assets that people own that make a lot of money. So if you buy a building for like $4 million or $10 million or $100 million, whatever it is, and then you set the rent of all those floors, and the building then becomes an asset. So it costs $4 million to buy. And once you've bought it, you carry the mortgage, but the mortgage is like, $800,000, whatever it is, whatever the mortgage is, but your rent is a lot more. So you're covering the mortgage, you're making, you own the asset and so on and so forth. But now with everybody going to net zero, those assets don't have anybody renting them anymore. And those assets are frozen and kind of, what do you do? Because there's all that money tied up in there and it's not making money anymore, right? And so that's one aspect of this, the stranded assets. But the important one is highlighted by Brian Lilly. He says not only significant stranded assets in the buildings and the real estate, but this article talks about how banks will stop working with companies that the bank doesn't feel are green enough. And it's already happening. Interesting. So this part, Carney warned investors about banking on these deadlines slipping by. There will be people who either implicitly or explicitly think that these timelines are going to shift, or that somehow or other it's not going to become a binding constraint. But this is a big risk to take, he says, ... And then Dutch bank ING last month warned 2,000 of its biggest clients, including commercial real estate developers and owners, that it would stop providing them with financing if they failed to make sufficient progress on tackling their climate impacts. If it found that commercial real estate was a laggard compared to other sectors when it came to disclosing climate impacts. How long do you think before people step outside of the system that is forcing this nonsense? Like if you're a big business, and I couldn't even imagine like just a big business that does big business, and some government lackey comes up to you and says, you're not meeting the climate commitments that we're promising, so we're not going to finance you. That may seem like a problem initially until you go buy the bank or you buy enough Bitcoin to finance your own kind of loan and back and forth without all that ESG nonsense. Like how long before people honestly step out? And if they step out, what's going to be the punishment? Because you need an incentive, but you also need a stick. You need a way to find them or bring them back in. They're going to get charged with fraud, right? Improperly trading or something like that. I don't know. But it seems like they need some other way to bring people back on side if they decide to step out of the system that is forcing this nonsense, because it is just nonsense. It's just taking control of businesses with taxes and over regulation and that, nothing else, absolutely nothing else. Daylight Freedom Foundation says, breaking, we already have programmable money that's tied to energy credits. The Duconomy MasterCard can shut off your access to money if you exceed the carbon limit. Check out the details. So that's interesting, right? So they can just turn off your access to money if they're like, oh, I think that that's voluntary. I don't think that you have to use this card. I think that you can tell it like I'm using this to limit my carbon, whatever. And it's like a feature, it's a feature, not a bug. People ask for this, but they're just brainwashed and they don't understand that climate change is a hoax used to steal our money, and that's it. It's not valid. It's a complete hoax, totally 100% hoax. Here's Ryan Garrettson. Everybody's making fun of Chrystia Freeland being a little on the bigger side, right? And I'm just happy she's not wearing the red dress anymore. I'll tell you honestly, if you go and sit in a lot of meetings, there's food everywhere. Like if you I used to work in schools, and the people in schools are always on a weight loss challenge, because I guess sitting on a teacher's desk is fattening as well, I'm sure, I guess. I used to work in schools and I would get so many steps because you're always walking. Like you're always walking. So I would have like 15,000 steps. Wouldn't even be a high day for me, like 20,000 steps, sure. So there's always food around. You go to a meeting with the principal or something like that. You go to a meeting with families or anything like that. You go to a meeting with ministers, right? You go to a committee meeting, something like that. The committee meeting starts at like 2:30, and by 4 o'clock, you're hungry or whatever. And they'll have a spread of like food that you can go and just grab. So like that's gonna impact, because most people don't understand that the amount of calories you eat show on your body, right? Like that's just it. If you overeat, it shows. And anyway, so she's not riding her bike and she's eating too many calories, it seems, for her metabolism. And what else is this talking about? Ryan says Freeland is bragging about how the great advice they're receiving from Yellow Teeth Mark Carney and Stephen Polaz, while claiming as fact that the cons get their advice from Elon Musk and Tucker Carlson. Man, I can't wait for this party to disappear into obscurity. I think people would rather have Elon Musk. Like, I don't think that that's a smear, right? If somebody said Elon Musk and Tucker Carlson, well, Tucker Carlson's not really a benefit for financial advice. Elon's good for like business advice because of what he's accomplished. But I don't know running a government. You know, he's running a couple of very, very busy businesses, right? But running a government's got to be different, right? It's different, isn't it? Here's Chrystia Freeland bragging. Or is it?
From smart former Canadian central bankers like Mark Carney and like Steve Pelosi, who is doing some great work advising us on how to encourage Canadian pension funds to invest more in Canada. Meanwhile, Mr. Speaker, on that side of the House, they get their foreign policy advice from Elon Musk and from Tucker Carlson. They should be ashamed of themselves. The people of Ukraine certainly know what's going on.
Foreign policy from Elon Musk and Tucker Carlson. Really? Really? That's interesting. Dan McTeague is responding to this. Holly Doan says, underground economy comprises a third of Canadian trucking industry, Commons Finance Committee told. Black market operators dodge billions in tax and flout labor laws. So, please help us, says Canada Trucking. Yeah, like I remember when people would make runs when I was young and like when I was 20 or whatever, and we all used to smoke. And some of my poorer friends would make runs up to the reserve and go and buy cigarettes because they would get no taxes and it was super cheap. And you get like 4 or 5 cartons for the price of 2 cartons or something. I don't know. There's some deal. And so this is the same, right? Like if you can, we were just talking about the price of taxes on trucks with the clean fuel standard, and some of the taxes you can't avoid, but some of them you can. And so the ones they can avoid, is there black market gasoline? I would imagine there's black market gasoline. Is anybody getting into this? I'm not encouraging this, but it seems there's going to be a point where people say, why are we paying the government all this money? For what do they deliver? Like these people deliver nothing but misery. Why are we paying them? I'm sure there's got to be a black market for gasoline. How would that even work? Anyway, it's like you'd get in less trouble for selling black market gasoline than you would for selling raw milk. I feel. Dan McTeague says, Justin's gems, no hint like using one's charitable status to avoid paying taxes. Let's start with companies operating out of temples, gurdwaras in places like Brampton and Surrey. So, it's even super easy to dodge the taxes. You just have to have a religious exemption. Wow. And I mean, Canada's pretty open with who can get a religious exemption. As long as you're not Christian, I mean, you're golden. Michael Barrett says, Trudeau's minister expects Canadians to believe she's surprised about the Liberal government dropping $9 million on a New York City condo for Trudeau's media pal. This is like, they're trying to make a big deal. They're like, $9 million. I can't even believe they'd spend that much money. And they want to spend more money in Ukraine, right? Like, we spent $4 billion in Ukraine. What have we got from that, right? And they're like, Jolie didn't even know about the apartment in New York. Can you believe that? And I'm saying, like, I feel like we spend a lot more money on bullshit wars and no accountability. $600 billion. Catherine McKenna, where's the money? $9 million. And this is the one they're focused on. It's a miss for me, dog. You know, like I'm not sure they're focused on the right things. Chinese traders. I want Chinese traders in the House of Commons who are trying to pass censorship laws election. That's the election I want. I don't want a carbon tax election. I don't give a rat's ass. I mean, I care about the carbon tax. And I care about the traders in the government more, though. And I feel like other people might care about the traders in the government more. And the fact that they're trying to cover it up. I mean, the cover-up's worse, right? Like Watergate was a thing, but the cover-up, that was the thing that got them. And so it seems like all of what's happening is justification to get rid of these crooks. And yet we're arguing about a very small piece of the pie where we know where the money is and how it got there, et cetera, et cetera. And huge swaths of money are going big question marks. And like, it doesn't seem like anybody really wants to focus on that. So I'm glad that these guys are, picking things like orange juice, right? $16 orange juice. That's quite relatable. I guess people can associate with that. It seems like it's a strategy, but I feel like they're missing the big fish. Right? Like they're getting, I don't even fish, so I don't even know fish analogy, but they're getting a small fish when there's big fish all over the place. And they could get those big fish if they really tried, but they're just not even trying, right? Or actively trying to get the small fish. Hello, everyone. Thanks very much for watching. This is just a short version of a longer show. If you'd like to get the whole show, you can go over to CanadaPoly.com and sign up for a subscription. Just look in the drop-down tab for Shop and Donate and look for subscriptions, and you'll get immediate access to the full show Love to see you. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful